Let's draw a cute girl on a bicycle in Procreate. You'll get a free drawing guide, brushes, and a color palette to follow along. I'll guide you step by step and share helpful tips and tricks, secret techniques, and Procreate features I use all the time. To follow along with me, you can download a free file that includes a detailed palette, a reference image, a canvas, a guide, and a paper texture. My patrons get access to a more detailed guide, exclusive lessons, and the full set of brushes. 3 of those brushes are also available for free to everyone, and those are the ones I'll be using in this lesson. Let's create the first layer and pick this color. To select a color, just tap and hold on it for a second. Now let's choose a brush. We'll start with the signature graphite. To adjust the brush size, use the slider on the left. It is the first of the 3 brushes available for free. Double-tap your pencil to switch to the eraser. We'll use signature graphite for the eraser as well. It's so convenient for erasing that I never switch it out. Signature graphite is pressure sensitive, so it can go from barely visible to quite dense, depending on how hard you press. To clear everything on this layer, use this gesture. When you're drawing, don't worry too much about keeping the proportions perfect. I constantly switch to the eraser to refine the shape and adjust the outline. If the guide layer feels too prominent, lower its opacity. Just don't forget to lock it again afterward. Once the head shape is done, we'll move on. Create a new layer and draw the ear. I'm going to hide the head shape layer and use the eraser a bit. To help you with drawing, there's a reference image. Unlock its layer and move it to wherever you're working. Just like with the guide, make sure to lock this layer so you don't accidentally draw on it. Now we're going to draw the hair. Create a new layer, pick a color, and switch to the next brush, pastel pencil. It's the second of the 3 brushes available to everyone for free. It's a really versatile tool, and with a bit of practice, it can replace a whole bunch of other brushes. I always set the size before I start drawing because both size and pressure really affect how this brush behaves. Here are a few examples of how it looks with different approaches. Use a light touch for the outline and go over it a few times to build it up gradually. When you're filling in the shape, increase the brush size, but ease off near the edges if you want to avoid the texture defects. Let's move the ear layer above the hair layer and start drawing the headband with a flower. As you can see, I'm constantly switching between the eraser and the brush. This way, I'm not just cleaning up the edges and defining the shape, I'm also breaking up the uniform texture a bit. That makes the shape's edges look more natural and less mechanical. Create a new layer, pick a color for the flower, and set the right brush size. We'll begin with a quick sketch to plan out how the petals will be arranged and how many we want. Then we'll draw the petals directly over those guidelines. Next, we'll switch back to the previous color, change the brush to pastel pencil, create a new layer, and paint the center of the flower. Now I'll show you a trick that helps us achieve 2 things at once. It adds density to the object, and at the same time, in some cases, gives us a more varied texture. Duplicate the layer and make some changes to it. Sometimes just rotating it, other times distorting it in other ways. I'll show you more complex examples of this technique later on. After that, we'll merge the layers with this gesture. Pay close attention to how I create a new layer. It always gets added above the currently selected one, so keep that in mind when you're building up your layers. We're drawing more hair now with the signature graphite, switching between brush sizes depending on whether we are outlining or filling in. To draw some individual strands or add subtle hair details, let's switch back to pastel pencil. After drawing a lock of hair, I duplicate the layer to make it more solid. Then I tap the layer and add a mask to it. This is a super useful tool and it's worth getting comfortable with early on. In the mask, we use black and white only. To switch between them, tap and hold the color icon for a second. After picking black, I hide parts of the layer just by painting over it with that color. Switching to white, I bring those areas back. Then I merge the layer and its mask. In this next example, I duplicate the layer twice, then take the top copy and distort it a bit. It's the same trick I used for the flower center earlier, just with a different kind of distortion. And as usual, I'm constantly using the eraser. It's just as important as the brush itself. After that, I merge everything we've just created into one layer. Now we'll create a new layer to draw the nose. I'm using the signature graphite again, adjusting its size. Try not to press too hard right away. Sometimes it's better to start with light strokes. This is a great moment to show you how useful the transform tools are when you're adjusting shapes and proportions. You can also use the eraser for a soft fade. I don't do that here, but feel free to try it. Here I'm tweaking the shape a bit, just to add a subtle detail. Now we're moving on to the eyes. It's actually really simple, you just need to follow the steps. First, let's paint the basic eye shape. I usually fill it by hand, but you can also use autofill here if it works better for you. Don't forget to keep using the eraser and actually try to get into the habit. It's an essential part of the process. Let's create a perfect circle now. Just hold your pencil for a moment after drawing it, then tap the circle option at the top. Personally, I like using a textured brush for the eyes. For this, I'm using the pastel pencil. If you have the full brush set, you can use charcoal pencil here, and later I'll show you a method that combines different brushes. When filling in the circle, don't worry about making it perfectly smooth. A little texture actually works better. To deepen the layer and intensify the edge texture, I duplicate it. You can even rotate or flip the shape for variety. I delete the original circle, and now we're going to make copies of the textured one. Pick the next color, and fill in the duplicated circle. Move the layer underneath the first one, and scale it up a bit. Then do the same for another circle. Pick another color, fill it in, and drop it below the others in the layer stack. This last one will be even larger. Now apply a clipping mask to each circle so they all stay within the shape of the eye. Once all three are in place, you can freely move them around or adjust their proportions. Next, I'll show you how we'll be working with color in general, starting with how I add a highlight. For this, we'll only need the value mode in the color picker. Just set saturation to 0 and brightness to 100 to get a pure white. I switched the blending mode to screen, but honestly, normal works just as well in this case. The important part is lowering the opacity. Now I duplicate all these layers, so I can reuse them for the other eye. Select every other layer, just the new copies, and move them up in the stack. Finally, I merge these layers to keep the layers list neat and manageable. Now let's add some shading to the eyes. I don't always do this, but sometimes it helps to give them more depth. Create a new layer and apply a clipping mask. Then lower the brightness to 0 to get a pure black. Increase the brush size so signature graphite starts acting more like a soft brush. Tap the layer and change the blending mode to multiply. Then lower the layer's opacity, and of course you can always distort or move the layer around if you need so. Let's draw the eyelashes using the pastel pencil. Here we'll use the trick of layering copies to make the shape denser. I make 2 duplicates, then merge everything together. After that, you can even make another copy and distort it for variety. This example shows how one brush can give you completely different textures and density levels. Once you've mastered my 3 base brushes, you'll see how you can create an entire illustration with just those. The rest of the brushes in my set are there for experimenting and bringing in more variety to match your style. Drawing lips is really easy if you use a mask. First, just roughly block in the shape that's larger than you need. Then apply a mask to that layer. Switch to black and start shaping it the way you want. Merge the layer with its mask and do the same for the second lip. I'll move that layer down so the layer order matches the logic of the drawing. Draw the teeth and distort them if needed. Now let's add some shadows in the corners of the mouth. If you have the full brush set, you can use the plush pencil here. But from the base brushes, signature works well too. Once you've got a lot of layers, you can group them. Let's draw the cheeks now. Pick a color, create a new layer, apply a clipping mask, and increase the brush size so it feels nice and soft. If the color feels too intense, just lower the opacity of that layer. Now for the eyebrows. Drawing them is similar to how we did with the eyelashes, but here we don't need that layering trick, because a larger brush size gives us enough density right away. Make sure to use the eraser. It really helps clean up the shape and avoid that flat, uniform look. We're done with the head for now. Once the illustration is finished, we'll come back to add final touches. Let's move on to the neck. And for those who didn't know, you can undo by tapping with 2 fingers. But honestly, I still usually just erase manually instead of using undo. Now let's draw the dress, and then we'll move on to the hands. As you can see, I start by drawing past the outline and just clean up the edges with the eraser. That makes the whole process way faster. Create a new layer and pick the light color we used earlier on the headband. You can always adjust it later to make it fully white or nearly white. We'll be using the eraser here, but mask could work just as well. So now we are ready to draw the hands. Just follow the structure I'll show and everything will turn out fine. Start by sketching in the finger directions, then slowly build up the thickness while keeping an eye on the proportions. If one finger ends up thicker, make the others match it. Don't press too hard on the pencil so the pastel pencil doesn't get overly textured. Duplicate the layer to add more density, then merge the original and the copy. If you need to erase small details, shrink the eraser size. Once both hands are done, create a new layer and draw the leg. You can merge some layers to free up space in the Layers panel. Now let's paint the flowers in the basket. To draw the leaves, it's best to use the pastel pencil. I already showed you how to draw a simple flower at the beginning of the lesson, so now I'll show you the layer sequence for the flowers, one by one, and we'll keep going from there. We'll save the details for the end of the lesson, when I show you how to choose your own colors. For now, we'll start painting the bicycle. The hardest part of drawing a bicycle is getting the structure right. Pay attention to how I'm building up the layers. That'll make the whole process easier. Here, for example, I'm drawing two elements on a single layer. Let's draw the wheel, create a new layer, pick the color, and increase the brush size a bit. I'm not even trying to make the wheel perfectly round. A flawless circle won't improve a children's illustration, in fact, the opposite. If you're having trouble seeing a light color against white, just make it darker temporarily. You can always recolor it later. Just lower the brightness a bit. To change the layer's color, just select the new one and fill the layer again. Now let's create a new layer and draw the bike handlebar. We need a gray color here. Just take the light tone we used earlier and lower its brightness. It looked a bit too light for me, so I dropped the brightness again and filled the layer. Some things are so simple to draw I don't spend much time explaining them. But if you focus on the parts I do break down and try them in practice, your drawing skills will really start to improve. After drawing the grips, let's move on to the ribbons. Use the signature graphite for this, just scale it down. Then we keep adding more bike details. Sometimes we create layers in the wrong place. If that happens, just go into the Layers panel and move the layer up or down. This layer also has two parts drawn on it, just like before. I'm using the same brush for the entire bike. After adding another detail, we'll draw the second leg, the one that's behind the wheel. Now let's create a new layer for the bike frame. I'll move that one below the seat layer, so it sits in the right position. Now let's create a simple shadow color as an example. I picked a color directly from the drawing. It came out to 26 hue. That's close to 25, so let's step it back and adjust it to 20. Then we change the saturation and brightness. I set saturation to 24 and brightness to 91. When tweaking colors, we only count steps in the hue value. That's the one we segment intentionally. Next, we'll add the remaining two wheels, the bar between them, and just keep going. What's important to understand is that those of you who follow my tutorials aren't just copying from a template. You're building your foundation, learning the principles, and developing the ability to create your own illustrations. Once you've gone through all the steps and absorbed the process, you'll already have a solid amount of experience. And if you're just here to relax and draw, that's totally fine too. Drawing is a great hobby, and it really helps calm your mind and improve focus. The most important thing, don't try to copy my reference exactly. Just enjoy the process and have fun while drawing. There are plenty more lessons and illustrations ahead, and your drawing skills will keep improving naturally. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, and give this tutorial a like. And if you want to draw even more, you're very welcome on my Patreon, where you'll find a lot of extra illustrations. Now that we've painted the cloud, it's a good idea to add some haze behind it. To do that, increase the size of the signature graphite quite a lot and use a very light touch when drawing. This haze helps blend the cloud into the background and gives the whole scene a more unified feel. We'll also scale up the eraser significantly and gently soften the haze where it looks a bit too heavy. We start by painting one flower, then make copies of it. Once done, we merge all the layers and lower the opacity. Then we paint a few simple flowers on the left, and after that we'll move on to drawing butterflies. With butterflies, I'll show you how to draw small, crisp details when they're actually needed. After we paint the butterfly's body, we won't draw the antennae on the same layer. Instead, we'll create a new layer just for the antennae. That way we can make the stroke denser, and we'll also be able to adjust the size and rotation as needed. Then we'll duplicate the layer, move it into place, and merge them. Now let's create another layer, pick the next color, and paint the butterfly wings. Let's pick a secondary, lighter version of this color. First, raise the brightness all the way to 100, then lower the saturation a bit and see how it looks. I feel like it could be even lighter, so I'll reduce the saturation even more. Now the color looks just right. It's noticeably lighter than the main tone, but not too bright. Let's now pick a soft highlight color for the second butterfly. Again, we're not changing the hue here, we're just adjusting the brightness and saturation. Now we'll add a bit more detail to the girl's face by creating a new layer. For this, we'll use one of the basic free brushes, the gesture pencil. Now let's add some shadow to neck. We'll create a new layer and set it as a clipping mask. We'll use the second tone from the skin palette. Adjust the brush size as needed, and once the shadow is in place, you can tweak its shape a bit if necessary. Let's also add some detail to the ear. Now we'll choose a color for the hairlines. First, sample directly from the drawing and check the color values. The hue here is around 15. Let's shift it one step left, from 15 to 10. Then raise the saturation and lower the brightness. Try a few samples until you find a combo that works. I ended up with saturation at 73 and brightness at 53. Now we'll pick a tone that works for both lines and shadows on the dress. First, create a new layer and set a clipping mask. Sample the color from the dress, then check its values. We step one value back in hue, from 10 to 5, and then adjust the saturation and brightness. Increase the signature brush size to make edges softer, and draw the shadow. Then we'll add a new layer, switch to the pastel pencil, and draw the lines. Try using different brushes too. Each one has a unique density, and they behave quite differently when drawing lines. To speed up your learning process with color choices, I'd recommend not just copying the numbers I use, but rather following this method and figuring out your own values. If you enjoyed this tutorial, give it a thumbs up, share it with a friend, and subscribe so you don't miss new tutorials on my channel. Thank you for watching, see you soon!